Some parts of London are handing out access to land right now. Not in the way most people think, but through programs that almost nobody knows about. While everyone's searching for affordable housing or community space, certain districts have schemes running that could change everything. The catch? Most people have no idea these opportunities exist. London property prices are insane. Everyone knows that. But what if there was another way? What if certain boroughs were opening up land access through programs designed to get people involved in their communities, build affordable housing, or create green spaces? This isn't about buying a mansion in Kensington. This is about real opportunities that are happening right now across London. Here's what's actually going on. Several London districts have initiatives that provide land access through community programs, affordable housing schemes, and urban regeneration projects. These aren't advertised on billboards. Most people walk past these opportunities every single day without knowing they exist. The land isn't technically free, but the access is significantly cheaper or even available through community participation rather than massive upfront costs. Why does this matter? London is one of the most expensive cities on earth. Space is limited. Green areas are disappearing. Affordable housing is becoming a distant dream for many people. But some boroughs are trying something different. They're using unused land, underutilized spaces, and regeneration zones to create opportunities that actually benefit local residents. The programs vary wildly depending on the district. Some offer community garden plots. Others provide land for affordable housing developments. A few are experimenting with urban farms, creative studios, and community hubs. The common thread: these are legitimate ways to access land in London without the traditional property market chaos. Now let's break down exactly which districts are offering these opportunities and what's available in each area. Understanding the specifics matters because each borough has different requirements, different application processes, and different types of land access available. District 1. Southwark is running one of the most interesting programs in London right now. The borough has implemented what they call the Right to Grow initiative. This program specifically targets unused council land and transforms it into community growing spaces. The concept is straightforward but powerful. Residents can apply to use small plots of council-owned land for community gardens, urban farming, or green projects. The way it works is pretty simple. Southwark has identified numerous parcels of land across the borough that aren't being used for anything productive. These might be small patches next to housing estates, unused corners of parks, or strips of land alongside roads. Rather than letting these spaces sit empty or become dumping grounds, the council opens them up for community use. Applications go through the local council and groups of residents can band together to propose projects. The land isn't sold or given away permanently. Instead, it's made available through agreements that let communities use the space for growing food, creating gardens, or developing green areas. Some plots are tiny, maybe just enough for a few raised beds. Others are surprisingly large, potentially supporting full community gardens that serve dozens of families. What makes Southwark particularly interesting is how they've simplified the process. The council provides support through their parks department, offers guidance on what can be grown, and sometimes even helps with initial setup costs like soil, fencing, or water access. This isn't just land access, it's land access with support infrastructure. The benefits extend beyond just having space to grow vegetables. Communities using these plots report stronger neighbourhood connections, improved mental health from gardening activities, and access to fresh produce in areas where healthy food options might be limited. Some groups have even developed small-scale urban farms that supply local food banks or community kitchens. There are catches, obviously. The land agreements typically run for specific terms, often renewable but not permanent. The council can reclaim land if they need it for other purposes, though they usually provide notice. Groups applying need to demonstrate genuine community benefit and show they can maintain the space responsibly. But compared to trying to buy land in Southwark at market rates, which would cost astronomical amounts, this represents genuine accessible opportunity. District 2, Newham, has taken a different approach focused specifically on affordable housing and community development. The borough participates in the Homes for Londoners Land Fund, which is a London-wide initiative, but Newham has been particularly aggressive in identifying suitable sites and pushing developments forward. Here's how this works. The Greater London Authority, working with individual boroughs, identifies publicly owned land that could be used for affordable housing. This includes land owned by councils, Transport for London, NHS properties, and other public bodies. Rather than selling this land to the highest bidder on the open market, they make it available specifically for affordable housing projects. Newham has multiple sites currently in this pipeline. Some are former industrial areas that need redevelopment. Others are unused portions of existing housing estates. A few are brownfield sites, previously developed land that's been abandoned or underutilised. The borough actively works with housing associations, community land trusts, and affordable housing developers to transform these sites into actual homes. The land isn't free in the sense that someone can just claim it, but the access is dramatically different from normal property development. Housing associations can acquire land at below market rates specifically for affordable housing. Community land trusts can develop projects that keep housing permanently affordable. The barrier to entry drops from impossible for normal people to actually achievable through collective action. Newham also supports self-build projects on some of these sites. Self-build doesn't mean literally constructing a house with bare hands. It means groups of people forming cooperatives or associations, acquiring land through these programs, and then working with architects and builders to create homes they'll eventually own or rent at genuinely affordable rates. The process involves multiple steps. First, suitable land gets identified and assessed. Then community groups, housing associations, or developers submit proposals for what they'd build and how they'd keep it affordable. The borough evaluates these proposals based on community benefit, affordability commitments, and delivery timelines. Approved projects move forward with support from the council and access to the land. What's particularly interesting about Newham is the scale of their ambition. They're not talking about a handful of homes. Some of these projects involve dozens or even hundreds of affordable housing units. The borough has committed to delivering thousands of genuinely affordable homes over the next several years, and these land access programs form a crucial part of that strategy. The timeline varies significantly. Some projects move relatively quickly, with land access granted within a year or two. Others take longer due to planning requirements, site preparation needs, or funding complexities. But the key point is this: land that would normally be completely inaccessible to regular people or small community groups becomes available through these structured programs. District 3. Lewisham has focused heavily on community land trusts and cooperative housing models. The borough has been at the forefront of supporting CLTs, which are community-led organisations that develop and manage homes, community spaces, or commercial properties on behalf of local communities. Community land trusts work on a specific principle. The trust owns the land permanently, keeping it out of the speculative property market. Homes built on that land are then sold or rented to local people at genuinely affordable rates. When someone eventually moves out, the home gets resold at an affordable price to the next person, not at market rate. This creates permanently affordable housing rather than temporary solutions. Lewisham has made council-owned land available to CLTs at significantly reduced rates or through long-term leases. The borough identified several sites across the area where this model could work. Some are small infill plots, pieces of land between existing buildings. Others are larger sites suitable for more substantial developments. The Ross project in Lewisham, which stands for Rural Urban Synthesis Society, represents one of the most successful examples of this approach. The group worked with the council to acquire a site and develop a scheme of genuinely affordable homes built to high environmental standards. The homes are part owned by residents and part owned by the CLT, keeping them affordable long-term. What makes Lewisham's approach powerful is the support infrastructure. The borough doesn't just hand over land and say good luck. They provide advice, connect groups with technical experts, help navigate planning processes, and sometimes offer financial support through grants or low-interest loans. This handholding makes the difference between theoretical opportunity and actual completed projects. The borough also runs programs for community spaces and commercial developments using similar principles. Groups can apply for access to land for community centres, workshop spaces, creative studios, or small business hubs. The same basic approach applies. The land gets used for community benefit rather than maximum profit extraction. Application processes typically start with demonstrating genuine community need and support. Groups need to show they have local backing, a clear plan for the space, and capacity to manage the project. Lewisham Council then works with approved groups through feasibility studies, planning applications, and funding arrangements. The timeline runs into years rather than months, but the end result is genuinely affordable housing or community space that serves local needs. District 4. Barking and Dagenham. Barking and Dagenham has taken perhaps the most ambitious approach of any London borough when it comes to making land available for community benefit and affordable housing. The borough has been actively regenerating large portions of the area, and part of that regeneration involves innovative land use programs. The borough identified massive parcels of previously industrial or underutilised land across the area. Rather than selling everything to commercial developers for maximum short-term revenue, they've committed portions specifically for affordable housing, community facilities, and green spaces. This represents a different development philosophy compared to many other areas of London. One particularly interesting initiative involves meanwhile use agreements. These are temporary arrangements where land that's earmarked for future development but not immediately needed can be used by community groups, artists, small businesses, or social enterprises. The timeframes vary, sometimes just a year or two, sometimes significantly longer. But during that period, groups get access to space they'd never otherwise afford. Barking and Dagenham has used this approach to create community gardens, creative workspaces, small business incubators, and pop-up cultural venues. The land isn't permanently available, but the temporary access creates opportunities for projects that might never get off the ground otherwise. Some, meanwhile, used projects have proven so successful that they've secured permanent spaces or moved to other sites when the original land was needed. The borough also participates actively in affordable housing land programs. Multiple sites across Barking and Dagenham have been made available specifically for housing associations and community developers. The scale here is significant. We're talking about sites that could accommodate dozens or hundreds of affordable homes. What sets Barking and Dagenham apart is their willingness to experiment with different models. They've supported self-build groups, cooperative housing projects, modular housing developments, and traditional affordable housing schemes. The borough seems genuinely committed to trying different approaches rather than sticking with one rigid model. The application processes depend on the specific programme. Meanwhile, use typically involves submitting proposals for temporary projects with clear community benefit. Affordable housing land access goes through the standard London-wide programmes, but with borough-specific support and identified sites. The council has dedicated staff who work with community groups, housing associations, and developers to move projects forward. Geographic spread matters here. Barking and Dagenham is in East London, further from central London than some other boroughs mentioned. This affects property values and development pressures, which is part of why the borough has more flexibility to pursue innovative land use programmes. But that same location makes it increasingly attractive as other areas of London become completely unaffordable. District 5. Tower Hamlets. Tower Hamlets presents an interesting case because it's dealing with some of the most intense development pressure in London. Parts of the borough border the City of London and Canary Wharf. Property values are astronomical. Yet even here, programmes exist that provide land access for community benefit. The borough has supported several community land trust initiatives, particularly in areas of Tower Hamlets that face gentrification pressure. These CLTs work to create permanently affordable housing and protect community spaces from being swept away by commercial development. Tower Hamlets also has extensive community garden and growing space programs. The borough contains numerous estates and dense residential areas where access to green space is limited. Council-owned land has been identified for community gardens, with support from the Parks Department and local organisations. These gardens serve as crucial green lungs in heavily built-up areas. What makes Tower Hamlets particularly interesting is how they balance development pressure with community needs. The borough has implemented planning policies that require developers to provide affordable housing and community space as part of larger developments. While not quite the same as direct land access programs, these policies create opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist. The borough also runs enterprise space programs where small businesses and social enterprises can access affordable commercial space. Some of this involves council-owned property made available at below-market rents. Other programs involve working with developers to include affordable workspace in new developments. For community groups looking to start social enterprises or small businesses, these programs provide crucial stepping stones. District 6. Hackney has developed a reputation for supporting creative and community-focused land use projects. The borough has been particularly active in converting unused or underutilized spaces into community assets. One of their most successful programs involves identifying small parcels of land that traditional developers would ignore because they're too small or awkwardly shaped for standard developments. These pocket sites, as they're sometimes called, get transformed into community gardens, microparks, creative studios, or small community facilities. Hackney Council maintains a register of these sites and actively works with community groups to match available land with community needs. The process involves submitting proposals that demonstrate local support and viable plans for maintaining the space long-term. What's particularly notable about Hackney is their support for creative and cultural uses of land. The borough has facilitated access to spaces for artists' studios, rehearsal spaces, and cultural venues. Some of these involve buildings rather than just land, but the principle remains the same. Council-owned assets get used for community benefit rather than being sold off for maximum revenue. Hackney also participates in affordable housing land programs, though the intense development pressure in the borough makes this challenging. Property values in much of Hackney have skyrocketed over the past 2 decades. Finding land that can be kept affordable requires creative solutions and strong political commitment. The borough has worked with community land trusts and housing cooperatives to develop small-scale, affordable housing schemes on sites that might otherwise be sold to luxury developers. The borough runs a community asset transfer program as well. This allows community organisations to take over the management or ownership of council-owned buildings and land. Sports clubs, community centres and social enterprises have used this program to secure long-term access to facilities they use. The transfers usually involve long leases at reduced rents rather than outright ownership, but they provide security that short-term licenses don't offer. Application processes in Hackney typically require demonstrating genuine community engagement. The council wants to see that projects have local support, meet identified needs, and have realistic plans for sustainability. Groups that have done their homework, built community backing, and developed solid proposals tend to be more successful than those approaching cold with vague ideas. District 7. Lambeth has focused heavily on cooperative housing and community-led development. The borough contains some of the most innovative housing cooperatives in London, and the council has actively supported new cooperative developments by making land available on favourable terms. Cooperative housing involves groups of people coming together to collectively develop and manage housing. Members have a say in how their homes are run, and the cooperative structure keeps housing affordable long-term. Lambeth has identified several sites where this model could work and has worked with cooperative housing organisations to bring projects to fruition. The borough also has extensive community garden and food growing programmes. Lambeth contains numerous estates and urban areas where green space is limited. The council has converted unused land into growing spaces, with support programmes that help residents get started with gardening. Some of these spaces have evolved into significant community assets, hosting workshops, social events, and providing fresh produce to local residents. Lambeth participates in the London-wide affordable housing land programmes as well. Several sites across the borough have been earmarked for affordable housing rather than market-rate development. The borough works with housing associations and community developers to move these projects from identification to actual construction. One interesting aspect of Lambeth's approach is their emphasis on resident involvement in planning and development decisions. When land becomes available for community use, the council actively seeks input from local residents about what they'd like to see happen with the space. This bottom-up approach means developments are more likely to meet actual community needs rather than being imposed from above. The borough also supports meanwhile use projects. Temporary agreements allow community groups, artists, or social enterprises to use land or buildings for limited periods before permanent redevelopment happens. These arrangements have created spaces for community projects that might never secure permanent funding or locations, but provide valuable benefits during their temporary existence. District 8. Greenwich presents unique opportunities because the borough contains significant amounts of land that's either publicly owned or controlled by public bodies. Parts of Greenwich are highly desirable, close to central London with good transport links. Other parts face more challenging development conditions. This creates a mixed picture for land access opportunities. The borough has been active in supporting community land trusts, particularly in areas facing gentrification pressure. These CLTs work to preserve affordable housing and community spaces in neighbourhoods where property values are rising rapidly. Greenwich Council has made land available to support these initiatives, recognising that market forces alone would price out long-term residents. Greenwich also has strong programmes around community gardens and urban growing spaces. The borough contains a mix of urban density and surprising amounts of green space. Council-owned land has been converted to community gardens in areas where residents lack private gardens or easy access to growing space. Support from the Parks Department helps groups get established and maintain their gardens long-term. The borough participates in affordable housing land schemes with several sites identified across Greenwich for below-market housing development. These range from small infill plots suitable for a handful of homes to larger sites that could accommodate more substantial developments. The council works with housing associations and developers who commit to genuine affordability rather than the affordable housing that costs hundreds of thousands of pounds. Greenwich has also experimented with community ownership of local assets. Pubs, community centres and other facilities have been transferred to community ownership or management under long-term agreements. While not exactly land access in the traditional sense, these programmes represent ways that communities can secure long-term control of important local spaces. The application processes vary depending on the specific programme. Community garden applications typically go through the Parks Department. Affordable housing access involves working through London-wide programmes with borough support. Community asset transfers require demonstrating organisational capacity and clear plans for sustainable management. District 9. Waltham Forest. Waltham Forest has taken an interesting approach by combining environmental sustainability with community land access. The borough has been working to increase green cover, improve air quality, and create more community growing spaces. These goals align well with making land available for community gardens and urban farming projects. The council maintains a programme specifically for community food growing. Residents can apply to use council-owned land for gardens, allotments, or community farm projects. The borough provides support through advice, sometimes initial setup assistance, and connections to local growing networks. Several successful community gardens across Waltham Forest started through this programme. Waltham Forest also participates in affordable housing land initiatives. The borough has identified multiple sites for below-market housing development, working with housing associations and community groups to bring these projects forward. Some developments incorporate cooperative housing models or community land trust structures to ensure long-term affordability. The borough has been particularly supportive of meanwhile use arrangements. Empty buildings or unused land get activated through temporary agreements with community groups, artists, or social enterprises. These arrangements create vibrant community spaces during periods that might otherwise see land sitting vacant and unused. Waltham Forest has also experimented with participatory budgeting, where residents get to vote on how portions of the council budget are spent. Some of this funding has gone toward community projects that use council land, creating a direct democratic link between land access and community priorities. What makes Waltham Forest notable is the integration of different programs. Community gardens might incorporate educational workshops. Affordable housing developments might include community spaces or commercial areas for local businesses. The borough seems to think holistically about how land use can serve multiple community needs, rather than just addressing single issues. District 10, Haringey rounds out our list with a mixed approach that combines several different strategies for community land access. The borough faces significant development pressure in some areas, while other parts have more capacity for innovative land use programs. Haringey has supported several community land trust initiatives, particularly in areas facing rapid change and gentrification pressure. The council has worked with CLT organisations to identify suitable sites and navigate the complex process of establishing permanently affordable housing. These aren't quick projects. They often take years from initial idea to completed homes, but they create lasting community assets. The borough also runs programs for community gardens and growing spaces. Council-owned land has been converted to gardens across Haringey, with particular focus on areas where residents lack easy access to green space. The support structure includes connections to local gardening organisations and sometimes assistance with initial setup costs like soil, tools or fencing. Haringey participates in London-wide affordable housing land programmes. Several sites across the borough are earmarked for genuinely affordable housing rather than market-rate development. The council works with housing associations, cooperative housing groups and community developers to transform these sites from vacant land to actual homes people can afford. The borough has also experimented with creative use of small or difficult sites. Awkward parcels of land that don't fit standard development templates get used for community purposes instead. This might mean tiny pocket parks, community artwork, or small gathering spaces. While not massive land grants, these projects improve neighbourhoods and demonstrate creative thinking about land use. Haringey supports community asset transfers as well. Local organisations can take over management or ownership of community facilities under long-term agreements. Sports clubs, community centres, and other groups have secured their futures through these arrangements, rather than facing uncertain short-term leases. 10 London districts are currently running programmes that provide some form of land access for community benefit. These aren't hidden secrets, but they're not widely advertised either. Southwark, Newham, Lewisham, Barking and Dagenham, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Lambeth, Greenwich, Waltham Forest and Haringey all have initiatives ranging from community gardens to affordable housing land to creative use of council assets. The opportunities are real, but they require work, commitment, and realistic expectations. Land isn't being given away in the traditional sense. What's being offered is access, sometimes temporary, always with conditions, usually requiring significant effort to turn from abstract opportunity into actual completed project. For individuals or groups genuinely interested in community projects, affordable housing, or creative use of urban space, these programs represent possibilities that wouldn't otherwise exist. The barriers remain significant, but they're lower than trying to operate purely through commercial property markets in one of the world's most expensive cities. The common thread across all these programs is prioritizing community benefit over maximum financial return. That represents a fundamentally different approach to land use in a city where every square metre typically gets valued purely in monetary terms. Whether these models can scale up and genuinely challenge London's housing crisis and lack of community space remains to be seen. But the experiments are happening now across multiple boroughs, creating real assets that benefit real communities. Anyone serious about pursuing these opportunities should start local, research their own borough, connect with existing community groups, attend council meetings, and build understanding of what's actually possible, rather than what sounds appealing in abstract. The journey from interested observer to completed project is long and complex, but the results can transform neighborhoods and create lasting community assets.